Just want to say hello to those of you who have logged in. Thanks for being here. My name is Emily Vandy. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions at the Yale-Jackson School of Global Affairs. I think we can give it another minute or so just to make sure that folks have had time to log on. So yeah, thank you all for your patience and being here.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon on our HEI Showcase. Today we have Yale-Jackson University, and we also have a special guest. I will allow her to introduce herself and then be able to tell us everything that we need to know about grad school from Yale and all the opportunities that we can tap from the information we get. So I'll give it over to you, Emily, to introduce yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me here today, and thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your day to be here. My name is Emily Vandy. As I said, I am the Assistant Director of Admissions at the Yale-Jackson School of Global Affairs. So Jackson is a graduate school for those who are interested in degrees in global affairs, public policy, international relations, and things of that sort. So we have about 20 minutes for me to speak, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end. So I'm going to start by giving a brief overview of the school. I'll focus mainly on our flagship program, which is the one we accept the majority of applicants for and we fund the most generously. But of course, if you're interested in other degree programs offered at Jackson, I'm happy to speak more on those as well. So you can see up here the mission of the Jackson School of Global Affairs, right? We're focused on improving the world both today and for future generations through research, education, preservation, and practice, as well as preparing students for global leadership and service. And I think it's like the beginning and the end pieces of that that are really the most crucial. The students who are the best fit for Jackson are the ones who are passionate about creating change in the world, not just change in the country or the region that they live in, but global and widespread change, and change that will affect the world for future generations. And really our goal as an institution and as a school is to give students the tools to be able to create that change. One of the key parts of a Jackson degree is the flexibility. So we have two main degrees that are offered at the Yale-Jackson School of Global Affairs. As I said, I'm going to focus mainly on our flagship program, which is the MPP. That's the one listed up top on the screen. So this is a two-year master's program. It's a Master in Public Policy is what that stands for. And as part of this degree, you will have 16 courses total that you take. So roughly 4 every semester. You'll be enrolled for 4 semesters across 2 academic years. And what's so great about this degree and the way that it's structured is that of those 16 courses that we ask you to take, 4 are core pre-selected courses. Those 4 pre-selected core courses, 2 will be more STEM or quantitative focused, and then the other 2 will be more humanities and social behavioral science focused. So really the intention of this core is to expose you to all the different disciplines that are used in the public policy world. For example, we'll get a lot of students who come in with perhaps a more humanities-focused background, right? Maybe you studied history or political science in your undergraduate degree, and that's what your focus has been in. So the goal of the core is, to help expose you to economics and statistics and the way that those can be used in public policy, and really make sure that you're well-versed when it comes to how to answer some of these really big policy questions. So that's our core. Those are 4 courses. You'll take those with all of your peers, right? You guys are all in those studying and learning together and helping to create that cohort environment. But the other 12 courses that you take at Jackson, you get to choose what those are. So it's really quite flexible, especially compared to some other graduate degrees in the US. Of those 12 courses, you get to choose any courses that are offered at Jackson, so our Global Affairs School, but you can also choose courses at the other graduate schools at Yale. So that means if there is a business course that you want to take, or even a course in the law school, maybe a course in like the graduate history department that really interests you. Again, those are all open to you. And so what this means is that because you're able to take courses from other schools, Jackson is really attracting a really wide range of people who are interested in a very diverse set of issues across the policy spectrum. So you're learning from your peers, right? You're being exposed to these new ideas and new perspectives inside and outside the classroom, and it's an incredibly diverse cohort. And it is a small cohort. Some of you might have seen that on the screen. Compared to some of our peer policy programs, which can have anywhere from 100 to 200 students in a given year, we have anywhere from 35 to 40. People always ask me, like, what do I think is like the most special thing about Jackson? I think it's our size. I think it's the fact that we're really small. There are very, very few policy programs like that. I think of our class, our incoming class, like I know every student by name. I know what they're interested in. And the same is true of other folks, both staff and our academic professional team. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but really the kind of support that you have access to because of this small cohort, I think is pretty unparalleled in the graduate policy world. I will just mention briefly our one-year Master of Advanced Studies. Again, this is the degree where I won't talk too much about it, mainly because we don't offer funding for this degree. But if folks have questions and would like to know more, I'm happy to answer those at the end. So this is an even smaller cohort. This number is perhaps a little outdated. I would say anywhere from 5 to 10 students per year in this program. It's really intended for folks who are further along in their career. So we call this our mid-career degree. Folks with 7 to 10 years of experience, or perhaps a little bit more, who have a pretty specific gap in their knowledge that might be holding them back in their career. You come to Yale, to Jackson for 1 year and study, take courses in whatever you want. There is no core. You can pick every single one of your courses. And again, it's a 1-year degree really intended to help bridge some of that knowledge gap that folks might be missing out on. Our MPP, I did not mention this, is intended for early career professionals. So typically folks with anywhere from 2 to 5 years of work experience. You've been in the workforce, maybe you've been in the policy sphere and you've gotten your feet wet, you've seen what interests you. But again, you understand that there are a lot of areas that you might not know much about, or perhaps a specific area where you want to improve your knowledge. One other thing that I will say about Jackson and our flexibility is we do offer joint degrees with several of the other Yale graduate schools. In particular, we offer them with the School of Law, the School of Management, which is our business school, the School of the Environment, and the School of Public Health. So essentially what a joint degree is it's a way to get 2 separate master's degrees, but take 1 year less than you would to get them separately. So folks can either, we'll say that you apply to Jackson first. Typically, folks will spend their first year at Jackson. You do have to apply to both schools separately and be admitted separately. You'll spend your first year at Jackson, your second year at the other school, and then usually you spend your third and final year at Yale in a combination of both of those schools. So again, I'm happy to talk more about that process if folks have specific questions, but just know if you're interested in more than one area, this can be a really great way to combine some of those different fields. And Jackson is not just, traditional coursework. We really pride ourselves on being a school that's focused on policy practitioners. And so a lot of our practitioners are housed through these different centers. I won't go through them all and read them all. If one of these, again, pops out to you, I encourage you to do your research or ask me more about it. I'm happy to speak on it. But one that I'll highlight is our Schmidt program on artificial intelligence. So for folks who are interested in policy as it relates to artificial intelligence, we have one of our really wonderful faculty, Ted Wittenstein, who runs a program, an exchange program with a university in China. And every year they either take a group of our students to go visit that university or a group of Chinese students comes to visit Yale. And they have an entire week-long program where they're really focused on dialogue and how to create sustainable exchange between these two countries when it comes to artificial intelligence and technology policy. So again, your education is really not limited to the classroom. It is not limited to traditional faculty. We have a lot of folks who are very active in the policy sphere who are teaching our students and are involved in your education. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but again, one of the things I think is truly special about Jackson is the size of our community. I was talking to one of our current students and he told me, he likes to go for runs in the area around campus in a neighborhood where a lot of the graduate students live. And he said, like, every time I'm out and about, I see someone I know, whether that is a faculty member or a staff or a fellow student. So if you're the kind of person who likes to sit in the back of a classroom and not be called upon in discussions, to be frank, Jackson is probably not the place for you. This is really a community where everyone is active, everyone is involved. Our students want to know each other and to be challenged by each other. One thing our dean likes to say is that after you've graduated, perhaps 10, 15 years in the future, you might be sitting across the political aisle from someone that you went to school with, right? And you might disagree on politics and policies, but fundamentally, you'll respect each other as people because you had that experience, you shared that learning environment. And you can see just a few images of our students. They're outside some of our buildings here at Yale's campus. I think every single weekend, our students are always planning an event. Sometimes I would get kind of jealous of them because they do so many cute things. They went apple picking in the fall, which is a very local activity to do. They plan potlucks just about once every couple of weeks. They even had like a big end of year party where they like rented out a boat and like had this whole dinner event. So yeah, I think that's something special about coming to Jackson. You know, transitioning to a new university, a new country can be really daunting. But our students have each other's backs, and you know, you kind of have a built-in friend network once you get here, as well as an intellectual and professional network. So all this is great and wonderful, right? This current student experience. But I'm sure you guys are wondering, well, like, what does that look like for our students after graduation? And how do we translate that into success for them? So first, I'll talk a little bit about the summer experience. So as I mentioned, our MPP is a 2-year master's program, and that summer between your first and your second year, we do require students to do some sort of hands-on learning experience. The majority of our students will go on to pursue some sort of internship in the summer. But as you can see, you're also able to do research. And the really wonderful thing about this student experience or the summer experience is that Jackson will provide up to $6,000 to support that summer experience. So let's say you want to do work with a nonprofit, you know, nonprofits oftentimes cannot pay their interns. The really wonderful thing is, again, Jackson will provide up to $6,000 for you. So you just tell Jackson, hey, I want to work for this nonprofit. And they'll make sure that you're able to cover your living expenses and pursue an internship that matters to you. And of course, this is wonderful because it means you more or less get your choice of what company you want to work for in this internship, because you get to call them up and say, hey, I would really love to work for you. And if they can't afford to pay you, you say, you know, that's okay, I'll work for free. I just want to go and have that experience. And organizations are always very, very glad to have a Jackson grad for the summer. So that is the summer between your first and your second year. This is really helpful for folks in trying to figure out what it is that they want to do post-graduation. Perhaps coming to Jackson, you know, your prior work experience had been all in the government sector, and maybe you want to get a taste of what for-profit work looks like, right? This summer experience can be a good way to kind of test the waters on that and see what you might be interested in post-graduation. And then, of course, when it comes to post-graduation, you can see a little bit of the spread of jobs up here. So we get a pretty good mix of folks going into the government or civil service, whether that is the US government or foreign governments. Some folks do go into both private and nonprofit. And then we have a few people every year who will continue to pursue their education, although that is less common. Our degree is really focused on that hands-on practical experience. And I do want to mention our career department because I think this goes hand in hand with what makes Jackson so special and the smallness of our program. So we have 2 folks working in our career services department, which means there is one of them for about every 35 or so Jackson students. And again, it's hard to overstate how important that personalized touch point is. I know for a fact that our career services meet with every single student once they get to campus the fall of their first year. And they sit down, talk to you, see like what it is that you want to do after graduation. You know, maybe there's an idea or a career that you want to explore, but you're just not sure how to get there. They'll sit down, they'll brainstorm with you and make sure that you are getting to where you want to go after graduation. I had actually spoken to our assistant director of career services, Kristen. She's a fantastic colleague of mine. And she told me the story about a student who wanted to do an internship, their summer internship, at the Tony Blair Institute. And this was not an organization that Yale or Jackson had had connections with prior. We didn't have any alum there. We'd never had a student that had worked there before. And so what she did was she called up this organization and their recruiting department, and she said, hey, I've got this really incredible student and he wants to do an internship with you over the summer. Is that something that we can make happen? And this organization was so excited to hear from us that they actually created 3 dedicated internship spots every single summer for Jackson students. So again, because we're such a small school, our staff, our faculty are going out of their way to advocate for you. They're building those personal relationships, and they're making sure that whatever it is that you want to do, both in your time at Jackson and after graduation, that's something that they're able to personally support. So again, I think hard to overstate the importance of that really small school size. And And okay, this is one of the last big points that I want to get to, but perhaps the most important is the funding. So again, this is for our 2-year flagship program. We fully fund tuition for every single student who is admitted. So if you are admitted to our 2-year Master in Public Policy, you do not pay tuition. That is a promise to our students. In addition to that, the majority of our students are also receiving some funding to support those living expenses. This is not something that you need to apply separately for. Once you're filling out your application, there'll be a little checkbox that says something along the lines of, do you want to receive financial assistance from the Jackson School? As long as you click yes on that checkbox, we will consider you for that living support. So, we know that oftentimes a career in public policy or in government service is not one that you sign up for the money, right, for the financial return. And so we want to make sure that our students are able to pursue a career that actually matters to them and is meaningful without having to worry about repaying loans. So again, just to emphasize, if you are admitted to our 2-year Master in Public Policy, we fully fund tuition for every single student. And I'm happy to talk more in the Q&A about what those other forms of financial support might look like on campus for on-campus jobs and things of that nature. This is just to give you guys a sense of what our class might look like in a typical year. These numbers do need a little bit more refreshing, I would say, especially with this class that we most recently admitted. It's about a 50-50 split between men and women. And I think this year we actually have around 60% of our class is international, and the remaining 40% is from the US, which is a bit more typical. So again, we try and aim for around a 50-50 split of US citizens and international citizens. We believe it's a global affairs school. So of course it makes sense to have a global class and global perspectives that you all are learning from. Around 5 years of work experience, and you can see the GRE scores down here as well. And I will actually talk a little bit more about those now. So this is my last little bit I'm going to say before we move to Q&A. So I'm sure you're all wondering, right, like, what does the application actually look like? What do we want in our students and what are we asking for? Again, this is for our 2-year Master in Public Policy program. One big thing to think about is that we do require the GRE for every single applicant. So that is not something that we waive or intend to waive at this time. So if you are interested in applying, especially if you are interested in applying this upcoming academic year, I highly recommend looking into the GRE and taking that now if you have not already. To give you all a little bit more context, the main reason that we ask for the GRE is because of that quantitative score. So if we think back to the beginning of this presentation, when I talked about those 4 core courses, remember 2 of them are going to be more quantitative focused. One is stats and one is econ. And so the quantitative score of the GRE, it's a good indicator to us that you'll be successful in those classes, right? If we admit you, you have the capacity to do well. So that's why we're asking for the GRE. That's a big part of that reason. I should say first, our application deadline for the MPP is January 2nd. So keep that in mind as we're thinking through timelines. So the GRE, that is one big thing that we ask for. We also ask for 3 letters of recommendation. We typically recommend that at least one of them be from an academic reference, right? Maybe a college professor, and at least one of them be from a professional reference, could be, current supervisor or someone you work with. And then the 3rd letter of recommendation, it's up to you. We leave that to the student, whether you think an academic or a professional reference would be more appropriate. I think it's helpful to think of the application holistically, right? Perhaps you have some weak spots on your academic record. Maybe for that 3rd letter of recommendation, you choose a professor who you knew really well in college and who can speak to your academics. On the other hand, if your academics are very strong, you feel confident about that section of your application, you might not feel like there's anything else to address when it comes to academics. And so maybe a professional reference is more useful for you. Again, think through the different parts of your application. Where might there be a gap in information and what might be more helpful for the admissions committee? Statement of purpose is kind of like the heart of the application, right? That is, I would say, the most singular important aspect of it. So this is going to be up to 4 pages, and it's essentially where you tell us, like, here's why I want this degree. Here's what it means to me. I think oftentimes what I say about this is people usually do a good job in that statement of purpose and talking about what they've done in the past, how their past experiences have shaped their current interest in public policy. But oftentimes they don't tell us as much information about what it is that they want out of Jackson specifically, and how Jackson will help in their future career goals. So those are things to think about as well, right? That statement of purpose shouldn't just be looking back at your past, but should help explain how this degree connects to your future and what you want out of it. We'll ask for a resume as well. So 1 to 2 pages, tell us what you've been up to. Again, when we think through the balance of the application, you don't always need to put as much information in your statement of purpose about past work experience, because we see a lot of that in the resume. We'll ask for transcripts as well from any university that you have attended. And again, I can talk a little bit more about that. One final thing to note is that as I said, our application deadline is January 2nd. However, if you apply on or before December 1st, we automatically waive that application fee. So, I know those application fees can really add up. So keeping those timelines in mind, I think could be really helpful. When we say that your application must be submitted by December 1st, we actually don't mean every part of the application. Those letters of recommendation, those can come in later. Those can come in by January 2nd. It's mainly that statement of purpose, the resume, the transcripts, and the GRE. So if you get those in before December 1st, we automatically waive that application fee. But I've talked for just about 20 minutes now, so I do want to turn it over. I see we had a question come in the chat. Oh, just saying to post your questions in the chat box. Yes, so if you have questions, please go ahead and post those in the chat, and I am happy to address them. Happy to address anything related to the admissions process or the degree and student experience.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Great job. You hit the time mark, 20 minutes exactly. So would hope to get questions from the students, but before we get students posting their questions, I have a few questions for you. The first would be, what's the population like for international students at Jackson? The population ratio for internationals.
Yeah, it's a pretty good mix. Again, we try to have around 50% of our incoming class each year as international students. Depending on the year, that comes out to 15 to 20 international students per year. And across both of our degrees, we'll say it's 35 to 40 international students at a given time. And I can go back to that slide actually that has, again, this is just 1 year, so the exact numbers can change based year on year, but in the class of 2026, we had 16 different countries represented. And that's just at Jackson, right? Yale is a huge institution and has an incredible wealth of international students. So I can promise you will not be the only student from Nigeria. There'll be a really strong community for you there.
Great. Thank you. So how would you describe an ideal Jackson student? I heard you said so much. I love the fact that it's a needed community, family love. I mean, you don't get missing in the whole. So who would be an ideal student how would you describe an ideal student that gets into Jackson?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are a few different characteristics. I think one, and of course, this sounds a little obvious, but people who are interested in global affairs, right? Something to keep in mind is we're not just a public policy school, right? We really want folks who have that international experience, who want to do work across countries, across a global scale. Of course, coming from a different country, I think helps to contribute to that perspective. So that's one thing we're looking for. Certainly folks who have a leadership quality about them. And leadership can mean a lot of different things, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you've been a leadership when it comes to work experience. But people who have strong ideas about the world, the way they want to see it change, and who aren't afraid to be bold when it comes to implementing those ideas, I think those are the kinds of students that the admissions committee finds really exciting. And then last but not least, it does go back to that community piece, right? Like, because we're such a small school, like we want students who want to collaborate with their peers. You want to be challenged by people who have different perspectives and different mindsets than your own. So all those kind of come together, I would say, to form the typical Jackson student.
Great. How would you describe your favorite campus culture? So what should students look out for thinking about coming to Yale or coming to Jackson? What will be the culture that you say, hey, this is one fun thing we do and we love it every year?
Yeah, that's honestly something I was surprised by how much I enjoyed when I got to Yale and I got to Jackson was the campus culture. Again, like I can't overstate, like our students are actually friends, like they live together. We, just finished up admitting our class that will start this fall. And our current students were so cute. They like put together a spreadsheet of everyone who's like moving out of their apartment or has a place open to help our incoming students like find housing. And I think that really just illustrates the extent to which like our students are there as a support system for one another, especially within Jackson because the environment is so small. When it comes to Yale as a whole, I think that is a little bit more variable student to student, like the extent to which Jackson students are involved in the Yale-wide campus culture. But I think Yale overall is pretty connected. I think most of our students in Jackson are friends with other graduate students. There's actually a few different clubs and organizations that our Jackson students are a part of that are for the broader Yale graduate community. So especially if you're interested in like going to a lot of the cool events on campus, there's always like exciting speakers, like Ryan Reynolds was like here a few weeks ago on campus to speak. They have all these different events at some of like the restaurants on campus where like it's like free food. You like come and you taste all these things made by incredible chefs. So if that's something that you want to be involved in, the broader campus culture, it's absolutely open to our students and easy to get in touch with.
Great. Thank you very much, Emily. So for those of you who are watching and those of you who have joined us online, if you have your questions, please do send them in the chat box, or if you can type them in, we'll be able to read your questions and take more of the questions for Emily to answer. So going by stats, I'm happy you said, I mean, you'll find Nigerians at Yale. Currently, do you have like numbers? If you have numbers of internationals, most likely Nigerian students were
Of
currently,
international students at Yale overall,
yeah.
I
And
don't have them offhand.
okay, what will be the percentage for Nigerians, like generally, if you look at it overall, not just Jackson now?
I don't have access to, not every school like shares their
Okay,
data like
okay,
that, so I don't have
okay,
access to that. I can say with like pretty good confidence that Nigeria is definitely one of the better represented countries, especially within the African continent. Um, but yeah, I don't have access to that information offhand, unfortunately.
uh,
And I
uh,
am going to put my email in the chat
okay, good,
just
yeah.
for folks that have questions later.
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, my email is all over the website, but if you have questions, if you want to set up a time to meet one-on-one, please just send me an email. I'm happy to chat more about anything related to Jackson or the admissions process.
Good. Thank you for providing the breakdown. I see that very clear. Everyone who has the opportunity to just look at this would know basically what you need. I just wanted to ask for those who probably haven't gotten their transcripts all complete, they still have the opportunities to apply, pending when the transcripts are out. Because I know some students are just finishing and probably will want to take the advantage of submitting the applications before December 1. To get those free waivers. I'm sure
Yes.
many would want to take that
Yeah, so
advantage.
exactly as you said, yeah, if you essentially, you don't need to apply with your official transcripts. An unofficial transcript is perfectly fine at the time that
Okay,
you're applying. In fact, I would say don't spend the money to get your official transcript sent. If you are admitted and decide to enroll, that's when we'll want the official transcripts.
great.
So our students who are about to start in August are just now sending us their official transcripts. So don't worry about that if you don't have the official transcripts. One other thing that I will say, because I don't think I mentioned this, is English language testing. So for folks who either your native language is not English or your university degree was not taught in English, we do require some form of English language testing. So we take TOEFL, IELTS, Cambridge, and I believe that's it. So that's just one other thing to think about. But again, if your native language was not English or your university degree was not taught in English, you will have to send that English language test score to us with your application.
So for those who went through, like, do you waive TOEFL for Nigerian students? Like, we all went through the university, teach well taught in English. I know some institutions will insist that you provide a TOEFL score. Some would say, oh, we recognize Nigeria as an English-speaking country, so we'll waive it.
Yeah, it really depends on the institution you got your
Okay.
degree from for us more than the country. So if the institution is teaching in English, then that's perfectly fine for us. And you would not need to send an English language test in that
Oh,
case.
great, 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 great. Thank you. I don't see any question in the chat box. at the moment.
Neither.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to all of our students for being here today. And again, I do want to encourage you, if you have questions that come up later, you have my email in the chat. It's all over the website as well. So please do reach out, and I'm happy to set up a time to chat and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Emily. It's a great pleasure having you, and thank you for informing us and giving us very good information on how students can apply into Jackson program, particularly the MPP. I think is exciting for anyone who is looking at policy and looking at global issues. It'd be great to take advantage of the information and apply. And we'll also continue to share this information on our social media handles so students can continue to enjoy it.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank you
very
so much, everyone. Thanks for
Have a
joining.
great day. Yeah, bye.